Welcome back, everyone. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about widows and orphans, hyphenation and quotation marks. And basically these are typesetting errors that you could be making in your novel if you are self-publishing and doing the work of a typesetter yourself. So one of the truths about self-publishing is that the self-publisher takes on all of the roles that the publisher in a traditional house would be doing. The traditional publisher has different people doing different tasks. The self-publisher is often doing it all themselves. So this is a traditionally published book. It's from, let's see which press is doing there. I think it's Penguin, but let me check. This is a Penguin Random House book. So this is your traditionally published book, and this is a self-published book by Global Book Publishing. That is not, it might be an indie book, but it's not a large traditional publisher. So we're going to take a look at these two books side by side. This is a random book from just my stash of books that I bought last year. That was a local author that I support local authors. So the first thing, so this is a hardcover, but it's basically the same size as this book, which is a paperback. So the first thing you notice is that the margins on the traditionally published hardcover book are significantly bigger than the ones on the self-published title. This allows you, the smaller margins allow you to get more words per page, but it also can make the book feel crowded. And in this case, the margin on this side is just, maybe 3/8 if it's lucky. And it seems to be slightly smaller than the margin on this side. So the other thing to notice here, as we're comparing page to page, is this font on the traditionally published book. It's probably the same size or very close to it as this one, but it's showing off as being slightly smaller, so maybe a half point smaller. And the because of that, the leading is the spacing between the lines. So the leading on this book feels slightly more roomier than it does on this book. So visually, those are the differences you kind of immediately see. Of course, on the chapter header, and I'll go to one of the chapter headers here. Let me find one. So on the chapter header pages, you'll notice there is no header at the top. So both books have done the same on that. On this book, they have added a graphic piece on the corner, which is a stylistic thing. I think it crams the corner and makes it feel even more tight. On this book, the Penguin Press book, they did not use headers to identify the book title or the author. Oftentimes in traditional books, one side will have the title of the book, the other side will have the author. But they have elected to do only the page numbers, and they've centered them at the top or bottom of the page. And you'll notice on the chapter page, they've put the page number at the bottom. On the non-chapter beginning page, they've put their page number centered at the top. So they haven't crowded the top of their chapter page with the page number up there. so they've moved it around. So that's another stylistic difference. On your self-published title, you can see where they've added words at the top in the headers on both pages, and the page numbers in the bottom. And so they again added this graphic at the chapter, but I don't know, it's a style thing. So let's look at the next thing we want to look at. So one of the things we want to look at is when you have so an orphan is where you would start a paragraph here and have one line, and then it would be orphaned on this page. The rest of it would be on a second page, or even on the next page if it appeared here and went to the next page. A widow is where you might, I didn't find a sample in this book, which is good, but it might be where you come to the end of a chapter, such as here, and if only the last, say, 2 lines of this appeared on the next page, that would be a widow. It would be left on the page. Whereas the orphan actually happened here in a way, and I'm going to show you what happened. So the person setting the type started their lines at the same point at the top of the page. They got down here and had one line tailing down here. And instead of orphaning that line, they moved the line up to the beginning of this page. And what that caused was for the 2 pages don't match. So this page is shorter with not as many lines on it as this page. And that's just a different kind of error in typesetting. The typesetter wants the reading to be smooth, easy, continuous flow, and they don't want to make observable errors. And this is something I noticed. I was a typesetter for some time, so I noticed that they had taken the line and moved it as the fast way to correct the error. It's not necessarily the right way to correct the error. So the other thing that happens is what we call when you have gaps in the teeth. It's sort of a situation that happens in typesetting where the words do not fit the justification well. That would be the easiest way to put it. And it creates sort of an uneven spacing. You can tell that this is happening in some books easier than others, where they simply have a line that will stand out because it has way too many gaps. And what happens is the typesetting program that a lot of people are using that are available for regular people to do their own typesetting has default settings around hyphenation. And if the writer or the person setting the book doesn't like hyphens, and if you look at this book, you'll find there's very, very few hyphens in this book, then they have set the computer to reading hyphens as don't hyphenate. And that is the setting they have selected. So with that setting choice, a few things happen. And one of those is you get sort of this teeth gap, the gap in the teeth syndrome, where the words end up being spaced out too far. And so you'll have a page, and again, I'm not seeing a lot of this here, because they've used a fairly wide line length and their choice of words is not many long words. If they had larger or longer words, it would become more obvious, because the computer is then forced into spreading the words out. You can still see it where between this line there's this size of gap between the words, and in this line it's about half again wider. And this can become dramatically wider with some writers because they write using long words. And if you don't have the hyphenation opportunity, then you're forcing the computer to space out your words to make them fit in your justification. Here's another one with some of the gaps going on, which it doesn't look as good. It's gappy looking compared to the other type. That can become very pronounced. So what you want to consider, so if you look at this traditionally published book, it has hyphenation. The typesetter has elected to, they've hyphenated 3 times on this page, which for some writers would be a lot. But it's one of your choices to hyphenate to keep your pacing, your spacing between your words within certain boundaries, to keep it relatively the same. And that improves the appearance of your page. So Penguin has elected to use hyphenation here. One of the other choices they sometimes make is they will make a choice. You see where you have a quotation mark here that is at the beginning of a line, which is unusual because usually when people are speaking in dialogue, it's inset in a novel. But in this case, you have one at the top here that isn't. So for a typesetter, one of the choices they can be asked to make is to actually move the quotation mark outside in order to move the beginning of the word over so it'll line up on the justification. And that can happen in highly designed novels where the quotation mark and the hyphenation are seen to visually alter the text block. And so in order to prevent that, they'll hang the little mark outside of the text block. So in sample you may look at, you may find that happening. And that's a designer choice. It's usually a more expensive book that you would see that would have that, where the typesetter has been asked to really make this aesthetically pleasing when they open the book and look at it. So you want to go to your own books or go and get a collection of books from the library that are similar to what you're wanting to produce if you're self-publishing or working with an indie publisher. And you want to look at what the design choices are for the book that you're working on. Do you want to have hyphenation in order to remove the gap in the teeth syndrome? Or do you want to tolerate the wider spacing, the gaps in the teeth, which is the compromise? But if you'll notice here that these text blocks line up. And one of the things I talk about on Blue Sky, if you're one of my friends on Blue Sky, you've read me say this, is that your readers have all been brought up on traditionally published books. And the big publishers, typesetters, work within specific rules of the industry. And so the readers that have been reading, those are the books they're familiar with and comfortable with. They have a specific appearance, feel, way of handling things that the reader has been conditioned to understand is correct. So when you vary, when you go to something like this book with the really tight margins, the reader may feel that tightness. And they may notice, like I said, the gaps in the sentence or the lines, or they may notice the lack of hyphenation and things like that that should be there. They may not understand what they're seeing that's different or strange, but they may feel something is off about the book. And you want to be very careful to not give the reader an opportunity to think something's wrong with the book. You want them to think it's correct and to just invest in the story. So you don't want anything to pop them out of that and make them question their purchase. You want them to come back and buy more books by you. That's what you're looking for. So you have to pay attention to your details. And so today was all about orphans, widows, hyphenation, quotation marks, and some of the typesetting issues that the self-publisher should pay attention to. So a widow is where where you have a sentence and one line is left behind on another page. And so you, like if this was just that page, you wouldn't want that to happen. So as a self-publisher, you may end up rewriting a few sentences to tighten that up in the formatting, or you may make other choices. But you don't want to leave the widow or the orphan, which, as you saw in this other book, had one page shorter. You know, this page is shorter than this page in your text block. And that's an indicator there was an orphan. And the orphan was up here. This first line would have been down here and then push this up. And it just indicates that the typesetter either wasn't human, was part of automatic programming, or they didn't know what decision they should make in that situation. So if you're choosing to self-publish, I recommend you become very familiar with some of the typesetting issues that you're probably going to encounter and some of the solutions available to you. And you always want to base your book on the best quality of traditionally published book that you can find, and recognize why they made their decisions. The decision in this case to have wider margins tells the reader that the publisher believed a few extra pages to get the book together was worthwhile. On a mass market paperback, that's the little tiny paperbacks, they cram everything because they're going for a price point. But the reader understands that because all mass market paperbacks are tightly done. They have smaller fonts crowding the edges and as few pages as they can manage. But in a first release, the best book you're going to release, you want to go toward the best version of that you can go for, so that the reader believes they have made a good purchase. That's it for today, folks.